Welcome and good afternoon. I'm Brian Laux, Program Coordinator for Cardiac and Pulmonary Rehab at the University of Maryland, Charles Regional Medical Center. A lot has changed over the past year. We're beginning to move closer to life as we once knew it, but there are some things that we'll have to consider in the coming months. After being laser focused on preventing infection, many people have neglected other important areas of their health. Today, we will be discussing how to regain control of our lifestyle habits, such as eating, physical activity, and sleeping, as we break out of the COVID cocoon. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items to address. If you experience technical difficulties, post your issue in the Q&A panel found in the bottom right of your screen. This event is being recorded, so you can view it at a later time as well. This is also an interactive webinar, and we want your participation. We encourage you to submit written questions at any time during the presentation using the Q&A panel in the lower right of your screen. We will address questions during the Q&A session at the end. Please do not hesitate to ask a question, as questions will be shared anonymously, and we are all here to learn right alongside you. To begin, we're going to conduct an anonymous poll. Have you gained weight during the pandemic? We will address this question and your answers at the end. To help us reestablish healthy lifestyle changes and to address some of the weight and unhealthy habits we have gained during the pandemic, we have two guest speakers today. Joining us is Dr. Mila White, a board-certified family medicine specialist who treats the entire family from babies to the elderly. With a focus on weight management and lifestyle, Dr. White helps her patients address chronic conditions such as hypertension and diabetes at a foundational level. As a doctor of osteopathic medicine, she incorporates a whole person approach to her patient care, looking at how the different parts of the body work together to impact an individual's health. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. White. Could you please share a little bit more about yourself with us?
Sure. I think the only thing that I would add is I actually went to medical school in my late 40s, and doing my prereqs in order to get in medical school, I took a nutrition class. Really loved the class. Then had the opportunity to get a master's in nutrition right before entering medical school. And so my goal has always been, how can I help patients create health habits that support like a healthy person? And, nutrition plays just a huge role. It's certainly a big interest of mine, something that I have incorporated into my practice. And I just think is very helpful for the patients.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Our second guest speaker today is Jamila Bougayong. Jamila is a clinical dietitian with certifications in diabetes medical nutrition therapy and is currently pursuing a master's degree in human nutrition. Thank you for joining us today, Jamila. Could you also please share a little bit more about yourself? Jamila, I believe you might be on mute right now.
All right, let me see, go back in there. Can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yes, I really have a passion for nutrition. Is why I went into the field. It all started when my sister was diagnosed with diabetes. At that point, they didn't know which one it was. She was either type 1 or type 2. But I was like, I had an interest since I was 14 years old. And then, I grew out into becoming to this field. Originally, I wanted to do somewhere in the medical doctor part area, but I just wanted to focus highly on the nutrition part of it medically. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. So now let's go ahead and we'll start the conversation. So our first question today is for both of you. Based on the patients that you have seen, how has this pandemic affected people's eating, sleeping, and physical activity habits. Dr. White, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
I would say the first thing is loss of routine. You know, even those patients or just people in general who typically have a routine, who worked out based on a routine, who ate based on a routine, it was kind of lost. So I think a lot of binging on Netflix and binge eating, grazing, you know, with all the sitting that's been done, and we just kind of been cocooning. So I think that's the thing that stands out the most to me is just the loss of routine. Yeah.
Okay.
And from my experience, it's more of the people because I see more of the diabetes population, and most of them are working at home. And when they're working at home, they complain that they actually have a longer hours of work. So their driving hours was actually substituted for more longer work hours on a computer. So they're more sitting and sedentary, and the loss of, you know, like Dr. White said, routine, and especially because they're on insulin routine, so the time hours also change, and then being at home causes like stress in the house. You have the stress at home, you have the work stress at home, so then they start stress eating as well. So
Okay. And to follow up on that, how can we break some of these bad habits that we have formed during the pandemic? Dr. White, why don't we go ahead and start with you again?
Get back into a routine. I think the first thing you have to do is you got to get started. You have to restart. And most of us know how to, you know, you kind of have to get your mind focused on starting a routine back up, whether it's walking. I really suggest that people just start walking. It improves your mood, it helps you sleep. Just get moving. Even just 3 days a week, if you just can walk 30 minutes, even if you can't walk 30, do 15. Break it up throughout the day, right? But just get moving more so you can kind of get into that routine, because the more you walk, the more you can walk. You know, the more you do anything, the more you can do it. I would say that would be the first thing, because I think oftentimes food is the hardest. But getting up and walking, that would be my first thing. And then I think the second thing would be pick a time of day when you're going to stop eating. Just be realistic with yourself and pick a time of day when you're going to stop eating, so you can maybe just reduce the amount of grazing that you do in the evenings. That's something else I think to consider.
I totally agree with Dr. White. Just to get started on routine again, being motivated, you have to find yourself how to motivate yourself. But again, also with her, maybe set a time frame for only eating, so that way you don't end up grazing throughout the day. Because if you're not having meal, then automatically you're thinking that you didn't have a meal. It wasn't a large portion of meal, so you're thinking I can graze throughout the day. But in a nutshell, overall, it's a lot more than what you should have had at mealtime. So having a set time for your mealtime and your snack time away from your work, if you can, that's probably the best way you can do it too. So
Yeah. So it almost sounds like to reestablish these habits, you know, having a routine for your exercise or your activity, and as well your diet.
yes.
Okay. So staying within this COVID-19 pandemic, our next question actually involves COVID-19. If you have had COVID-19, are there any precautions one should take before jumping into an exercise or nutrition program? And do they need physician clearance?
I would say that if you're a long hauler, meaning that you still have symptoms after 6 weeks of being COVID positive, you're still symptomatic, you definitely need to be checked out by your physician. Some of the studies are showing that with as far as long haulers are concerned, 85% are showing neurological symptoms. So be mindful of that. I actually talked to one of our pulmonologists yesterday in reference to what are we seeing here at the clinic as far as COVID long hauler kind of symptoms. There's been some, and the recommendation is that they end up doing rehab. So they would actually come to you, Brian. But like if they came, for instance, want to be mindful if you're short of breath, if you come and see your primary care doctor, they're going to do the typical workup, which is chest x-ray. We can check your pulse ox in the office. And then it'll probably be a referral to pulmonology after that particular time. I think the other thing that has popped up is fatigue. And the recommendations for fatigue is really exercise. So those are some of the things that you want to be mindful of. But again, I think the main thing is if you're having symptoms 6 weeks later, come and see your doctor. You're short of breath, come see your doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that's one of the things we've seen in the rehab is that people will come in and they don't want to do the rehab because they're so fatigued, but things that make them fatigued are the things that fix it. So that's a very good point. Jamila, did you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
As far as nutrition wise, I think it all depends on the symptoms. Again, sometimes when you're having shortness of breath, it's hard for you to eat as well. So you have to choose something like more soup kind. But it all depends once you're, what you can tolerate as a person. But it all depends again on the symptoms that you're having. First, of course, be seen by your primary care doctor. So.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, are there health risks to engaging in physical activity for the first time if you haven't done so in a while?
Yeah. I would say yes. It depends. It depends. If you're that person who has a history of exercise, maybe you haven't exercised in 2 or 3 months, starting to walk or even starting to jog, it's probably not going to be such a big deal. But if you're really, really out of shape, you're carrying a lot of excess pounds, you're having difficulties walking from the parking lot to the grocery store, up a flight of stairs, you should come and see your primary care doctor.
How can one healthfully make dietary changes? And then also, how can one healthfully start a new exercise program? Jamila, why don't we start with you on this?
Yes. One? So with the diet, you just start with, it doesn't matter if it's cultural food. So if you like those high fat foods and high empty calorie food, I'm talking about, you want to dine out and stuff like that. Don't completely take them out of your diet just because you're just starting anew. But definitely increasing in your whole grain, increasing in your fruits and vegetables, and still able to dine out at least, for now, for the pandemic. But I mean, like, what I mean? If you're trying to order out, if you're used to doing it 6 times a week, then cut it down to maybe half, and then the following week, cut it down until you're able to do more cooking at home, you're more comfortable doing it. And for the exercise, like Dr. White said, cannot emphasize anymore the low intensity of walking benefits. If there's anything you can't do, but you're able to ambulate and move around, it's the walking. The walking is going to help you with everything. So start walking. And I would say too, even in the morning, if you have a big yard, start walking maybe 10 to 15 minutes to get the vitamin D, the sunlight outside too. That helps as well.
Nice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Dr. White, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't think so. I agree with Jamila.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's with walking, it's not hard to do. It's free. It doesn't have to be very intense, but some of the best studies on exercise are demonstrated with just basic, easy, moderate paced walking. So it's a really good point.
Right.
You know what? I will add this. Sorry, I will add this. Mm-hmm. What I have noticed about walking versus running, because I've had histories when I've run for a long time, but as I've gotten older, I have found that I can walk consistently, but I cannot run consistently because of the pounding on the joints.
Yeah.
So if I'm walking, I can walk 4 miles a day, 5 days a week with really no problems, but I couldn't run like that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I had the cardio strength to do it, I just didn't have the joints that would support that. So, and I think in the end, the results were the same. Yeah.
I actually was going to bring that up too. I was an avid runner because I was a dancer. I played tennis. So I played single tennis. I would always run in, between courts, across the courts. But after COVID shut down and locked down, no more gyms and stuff, all I did was walking. But I was walking at least 3 to 5 miles a day. But it's the same result. I have not gained a single pound. Actually, I've lost more weight than I was doing when I was running. But it's consistent, walking more consistent. And it doesn't have to be walking outside. If you're unable to move too much, you can walk around the house. And even put on like video dancing, just gentle movements that you enjoy on a daily basis. It doesn't have to be the walking, but if you want to dance, even if you can't dance, you have 2 right foot, just play some music and do the movement.
Yep. Excellent. It kind of reminds me, so there's a study that I like to point out a lot of times when we have patients in rehab, and it was called How Fast Does the Grim Reaper Walk? And the study, it looked at over 1,700 people, and they established the average walking speed of 2.0 miles per hour. Anything above 2.0, they cut their disease in half. Anything 3.0 or faster, they had no contact with death. And I just thought it's such a good study because it just highlights the simplicity of walking, and how well it works. So, so our next question, when it comes to diets, there's a lot of confusion. Everyone gets confused. Can you please describe some of the more common diets out there, such as keto, Mediterranean, intermittent fasting, and do they work?
Okay, so keto would be like more of higher fat intake versus a ratio of a lower carbohydrates. But some people though, when they do the keto, what I've found is that there's different kinds of keto that they made out of nowhere. There's the lazy keto, there's this half diet keto, there's a friendly keto diet. It all is in the same category. When they come and sit in here, that's still keto. One thing you want to do if you want to follow that is if you're doing more high fat, you should be looking at what kind of fat it is. If it's the healthy fat or the bad kind of fat, then you're putting more risk for cardiovascular disease on yourself. I did have a patient who was a diabetic patient and was on a keto diet, but ended up in the ER because of ketosis, and then the triglyceride level was just skyrocketed. It was elevated, all the lipid panels, but the person was highly focusing on going out to eat, like burgers, a lot more ground meat, a lot more heavy, higher meat, and then just vegetables at night. But technically, overall, your brain actually functions with carbohydrates. So you need all that carbohydrates for your brain, your normal metabolic functions to do regular movement and stuff like that. You can't just cut out all of the carbohydrates. For the Mediterranean, that one is highly researched and has been evidence-based proof that it helps with a lot of health issues. And so what Mediterranean does is basically more fruits, more veggies, more seafood, lenient on like 1 to 2 glasses of red wine a week, and some dairy in there. The intermittent fasting, that one's a little bit different. Intermittent fasting, we just have to be mindful. If you're a person who's always looking at the scale and then looking at, if you're that person who's always looking at the scale to say, oh, I gained this much weight and stuff like that, but not considering the fluid fluctuations, that could happen too. But also for people who may have some type of eating disorder, something that we just don't go in that, I think you may need to speak with a specialist on that one as well. And then it's intermittent fasting. There's so many hours restriction on it. There's a 16, there's an 8, there's whoever. Okay. But at the end of the night, when you're sleeping, before you sleep, that's already the start of the fasting. So from, if you don't eat, last meal was like 6 p.m. and then you don't eat the next day till 6 a.m., then you already fasted without trying to fast. You already fasted for 12 hours. So anything Dr. White would like to add?
Sure,
I
Dr.
think
White.
I think the only thing that I would add is that studies have shown that at the 1 year mark, it didn't really matter what the diet was. It really was all about the diet that the patient could stick with. And then there was a 2018 study on intermittent fasting, and it compared it to calorie restriction, found the same thing.
Yes.
At the end of the study, the numbers were the same, whether you restricted or whether you worked within a window. So it's just about what your preference is, how you like to eat, what you can really maintain. I think that's it. What can you really maintain? So.
I think that's a great point. Maintaining is the key. So to kind of follow up on that previous question, could you give us an example of who should not partake in these diets?
Oh, I did mention people who are struggling with, like, people who've already had done so many fad diets and trying another fad diet that won't work. Another chance again with doing another fad diet, it just won't work again. So those type of people, and people who are diabetic, I don't recommend them to do the intermittent fasting too, just because they might go hypoglycemic episode, meaning to say that their blood sugar could drop. Also for the keto, again, I already gave my experience on that. I've seen not just one, but multiple patients who've wind up in the ER with a higher level of blood glucose and ketones and triglyceride level. So it's just harder. Exactly. Because when you're diabetic, you're also at a higher risk. It's like 3/4 folds of increasing your cardiovascular and your heart disease. So you don't want to mess up and open that up again when you already had the diabetes.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. How do you set realistic nutrition and physical activity goals? And what is your take on cheat days? Dr. White, we'll go ahead and start with you on this one.
We're going to all cheat. We need to embrace the cheat. That's the first thing. So it's okay, no shame. We're just all we have things that we like to eat. So we're just going to have it every now and then. I think the problem comes with having it every day and knowing that it's not working for you. So, and I think the other thing is to know that when it comes to high sugary foods, it's just very addicting. And once you really start eating a bunch of high sugary foods, it's going to call your name. So you really feel compelled to keep eating high sugary foods. So you have to be mindful of that if I eat this piece of cake, I may have some cravings, but it's okay. I know I may have cravings. I don't have to eat it. So you have to have some level of control, I think, in terms of what you eat and knowing kind of like what the triggers are for eating foods that don't support your health. I think in terms of setting realistic goals, as a physician, my goal for my patients are to have, I guess to have a lifestyle that is very healthy. It may not even be their ideal weight, but their A1C is normal. Their lipid panel is normal. They have a normal blood pressure, right? That's my goal for my patients. They can walk upstairs, they can actually go and do things that they're interested in doing. It may not be their ideal perfect weight, but they're healthy. So I think in terms of answering that question, that's the realistic part of it. That maybe you just need to drop 10 pounds. Maybe you want to drop 20 pounds, but maybe you just need to drop 10. So I think that's part of being realistic.
Yeah, it's great advice. Jamila, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, actually, maybe a few. That's my favorite topic. So I totally agree with Dr. White. So I would say again, diet doesn't work, so don't look at it that way. Set a realistic goal when you can, because if you put a big realistic goal and you don't end up meeting it, then you end up weight cycling, and that's what you call with the yo-yo dieting. It's a weight cycling. You should do something that's lifestyle, and again, food is comfort. Food is comfort, and you should be able to enjoy it. So when you have cheat days, I don't even want to call them cheat days. There's really no such thing as cheat days. If you want it that day, go ahead and have it, as long as
That's
you
right.
know that you're having it. Even if you are diabetic and you know that it may raise your blood sugar, but when you come see us, we will give you carb budget on that to see if it can fit your diet, and most likely it will. You just have to, if you don't know it, cut a small slither piece and move on, because the thing is that if you don't taste it, you're going to end up binge eating it later on. So why not taste it now before it recycles? And it's like that ball of rock when you drop it from a mountain, and it just gets going down and down. It gets bigger. That's what that cravings is. So if you don't feed your cravings, it's just gonna, in circle, you're gonna end up having it anyway. So yeah, I think I've said that.
That's a good response.
Love it.
Thank you.
Let's see. So once you reach the goals that you have set, how do you maintain your new lifestyle?
You can't stop.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times you reach a weight goal and you think, I did it. I'm going to actually go back. You start doing those things that you used to do that got you in that predicament in the first place. It's a lifestyle. So in reaching your goal, this is how you live now. This is how you maintain it. One of the things, many of the studies, and Brian, you can chime in on this, but many of the studies totally support the fact that weightlifting is very important in terms of keeping your metabolism up. It's certainly the key thing for your resting expenditure of energy. So that's one of the main things in terms of maintaining what you have acquired is weightlifting. Highly recommended for women who are postmenopausal. Lift weights, increase your protein. But this is a new lifestyle. So you've been doing it for months and months. Just keep doing it.
Could have not said better.
Yeah,
I agree. If there's you can't change it. It's a lifestyle. It's just what you do. You start today, finish high, and maintain it. That's the only thing. Keep motivated. Maybe having a workout buddy or a friend that you always, that can motivate each other. That's what you need, is motivation. If you don't have the motivation, how can you start? So
yeah. And Dr. White, that was a great point about the strength training and the metabolic benefits of it. It's been a little while since I've seen it, but I feel like I remember a pound of muscle burns 50 calories a day, and a pound of fat burns like 5. So it's definitely helps you, achieve some of those metabolic goals like diabetes, weight loss, and so on. So that's a really good point.
absolutely.
What advice would you give to someone who may slip up or get discouraged or lose their motivation on their journey?
Get back on the train. It's okay.
yeah,
It's like, it's okay.
It's okay. You're only human. If you messed up yesterday or past weeks, or maybe during this COVID time, you haven't been exercising, it's okay. Tomorrow's a new day. Tomorrow's a new you. You can get it back again.
Yep, just start over.
Great. So yeah, I think this was a really good discussion on some of that. So thank you very much. That was very helpful. Now let's go ahead and continue the conversation by taking some questions from the audience members. Please remember your questions will be shared anonymously. No question is too much, and chances are, if you have a question, someone else has the same question. So we see a few of questions are starting to come in. Our first question today is, how much does the zinc, vitamin C, and elderberry really help in maintaining health during the pandemic?
That's an interesting question. So I actually read a study yesterday. The study that I read, I believe it was, it was in Egypt, I believe, but it was on PubMed. What it did was it compared 138 participants who all were COVID positive, who had lost their sense of smell. And in this study, the goal was to try to understand if zinc in particular played a role in helping the person get their smell back. And they actually did find that about 220, I believe, micrograms, 220, I have it written down here. 220 milligrams of zinc actually was able to reduce the time that the participants had loss of smell. But they found that the zinc did not reduce recovery time from COVID. But I think that the take home is that if you did lose your sense of smell, trying zinc will help. But I don't know about the other ones. I hadn't seen the other ones in the study, the vitamin C and the elderberry.
Okay. So our next question is, it says, you stated walking gives the same results as running. Would cycling for 30 minutes stationary give similar results as walking?
That's a good one for you, Brian.
I would say yes, it does. Yeah. I think anytime you can get a similar effect of activity or exercise, regardless of the mode, whether it's walking or running or swimming or stationary biking, if you can mimic the similar effect, yeah, I would say that it does give similar results. Our next question is, what's the best way to get started with a new lifestyle? I need to lose at least 20 pounds and I have arthritis in my knees.
I guess I'll take that one. Oh.
Okay, sure.
Good. Oh, I would say again, start with the walking, just lightly, whatever, as tolerated, wherever she can go. But first, start off with, you start with the meal. So start off with a balanced meal. Make sure you're increasing more of the fruits and vegetables because they do fill you up. And then whatever, if you feel like you still have room in there, then have some more. So it's kind of listening to your own bodies at this point because you haven't done any form of movement and any type of new lifestyle.
And so, Brian, would you recommend in this particular, I guess from my perspective, it all depends on arthritis in the knees. What does that mean? Like how bad is it? Are you having difficulties walking? Do you have a history? Have you seen an orthopedic person? Do you have a history of injections in your knees? Like I would have to know the severity of the arthritis and how functional the person is. Because I think the next step would be is if the walking is difficult, is riding the bike difficult? And if that's difficult, maybe swimming. We are in COVID, but actually indoor pools are open. That's kind of like what I would be searching for an activity that the patient could actually do that wouldn't cause pain.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As far as the arthritis in the knees, is walking tolerated? Yes or no? Okay, yes, proceed. If no, let's find something else. Whether it's, some lower impact modalities such as like cycling, if you have access to an elliptical, like you said, swimming. There are some ways that you can still get that intensity and that exercise in, but not put so much pressure on the knees.
Yeah.
What recommendations do you have for an individual wanting to eat more healthy food choices, but the spouse and children not so much?
Uh,
Go.
I can certainly chime in on that. This is what I have learned, and it's not really fair because what my husband eats, I just can't eat. I just the amount of calories that he consumes and all the muscle that's on his body is just, I'm just not comparable to that. My body type is just not comparable to that. So I think it is important that we're very realistic about what works individually for us. It doesn't mean that some of the things that he eats on a regular basis, I can't have every now and then. I just have to know that I can't eat like he eats. And Jamila, you may want to chime in on that one.
So
Yeah.
with let's start off with the kids. So the kids, you wanna see how they accept, like what kind of foods you want them to eat. Maybe explain why you're making them eat them. And another way to get the kids involved is actually having them help you with preparing the meals, not with cutting. If they're younger, don't don't allow them to have to hold on the knife and cut the vegetables and stuff like that, but maybe washing, choosing produce at the grocery stores, sorry, COVID, but plating them on the table. And that also goes if you're a husband like Dr. White, who has more muscle mass and eats more, then just have an accessibility of a balanced meal on the table. Is his food intake whatever he can intake, but whatever food you have in there, at least everybody's sharing them, some type of fruits and vegetables and protein and some type of starch in there. So at least everyone gets the same food. It's just the amount that varies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Having the same balance for everyone. It's just if you have a higher calorie requirement, you just eat more of that balance. So that's a great answer.
And I think the other thing that is important is that if once you become motivated to eat a really healthy diet, those in your household eventually will come along. When you do have young children, the parents dictate what the children eat. But when you have teenagers, it's less under your control because they eat outside the house. However, you bring the food inside the house. But I think that when the family members start to see one person in the family get healthier and healthier, it has a way of rubbing off on people. So I think it's just start. I think for the person who asked the question, I think you should just start eating very healthy in spite of what is around you and expect them to come along.
Yeah, that's a good one. Next question is, any special dietary or exercise advice for people over 55 who are recovering from COVID? I think we did touch on that a little bit during the discussion earlier, but if maybe we want to just recap that.
I think the main thing is if you are still having symptoms 6 weeks later, you should see your doctor. If you're not having any symptoms, if you're feeling back to normal, then it's just an assessment of where you are physically. Prior to COVID, were you in pretty good shape? Were you not in good shape? You got to kind of answer those questions. But you can just always, go to your physician and just get a checkup. It won't hurt,
Yeah. Yeah, and when you do start out slowly, because you might get a little bit more fatigued and short of breath at the first part of that, and then build it up slowly.
Yep.
All right. Next question is, I prefer weight training to cardio. Should I seek balance or focus more on cardio to start? I could take that one if you'd like.
Yeah. Because I would say lift.
I would say definitely balance. However, if you do prefer weight training to cardio, you could always do weight training at a cardio pace, such as circuit training, supersets, so many reps per minute, every minute on the minute. There's ways that you can do both and get the same benefits of each by just doing one or the other. So that would be my recommendation.
And I think the studies have shown that HIIT by far is the most superior way in terms of exercising. And those who don't know, HIIT is essentially what Brian just said. If you're incorporating a variety of exercises where you get your heart rate pumping and you're pumping iron and you're doing cardio stuff, it's just like a short routine, like 15 to 20 minutes. That's an opportunity to hit both of them. I think the thing as far as cardio is concerned, it does different things. So from a weight training standpoint, it's going to increase your metabolism because it's going to put more muscle on your body. But from a cardiovascular standpoint, it strengthens your heart. It helps with your mood. It helps you sleep. It's just a lot of positive things for both of them. So keep that in mind. And for those who are having mood issues, and we don't tend to talk about it, but those who are having mood issues, you need to exercise. That's the first recommendation, is to get out and just walk. It really does help your mood.
Yeah. I like the high intensity interval training because you get benefits of both in one workout. So that's really good. So again, thank you to everyone who has submitted questions. We will now close with our poll results and one final question for both of our speakers. According to the poll results, about 5% said they gained 10 to 15 pounds during the pandemic. 11% have gained 15 or more pounds, and about 16% did not gain any weight.
Okay.
In seeing this information, to both of our speakers, what are your top 2 tips for reestablishing healthy lifestyle habits?
I think we kind of started the talk off with this. So I would still say start walking. Just start walking. It's easy. The weather is really nice. Just start moving and you're just going to start to enjoy it. And I think the other thing is, I think the window in terms of eating. I think it's important to at least acknowledge that you graze. If you graze, everybody doesn't, but most of us do. Acknowledge the fact that you can graze, and when are you grazing and why are you grazing? Is it because you don't eat enough food during the middle of the day? Or are you just eating in the evenings because you're watching television? But I think become mindful of when you do the excess eating. I think that would be a good start. And again, my other point was have a point in the day when you stop eating. But Jamila had made a good point too, is have set times when you eat. So maybe she can also chime in on that.
Yes. So having a set time when you eat, so that way you have that one focus time that you only have that time to eat, and then you don't end up grazing, you don't end up binge eating on other things, or even snacking more often versus having a grazing period than actually having a meal. But my tip probably is number one is free yourself from food guilt. So like what Dr. White said with the cheating days, yes, you can have those cheat days if you wanted to, but free yourself from food guilt, because it just makes it harder for you moving forward. What can you consider as good food and bad food? And then you're going to end up having to research more ideas of menus. And it's not bad because you're going to go out of your comfort zone to cook different kinds of meals. But I'm just saying, just free yourself from guilt, because you want to have and enjoy the food that you're having. And especially when you're gathering and socializing with others, there might not be a food that you want in there. But you just have to, if you're hungry, eat it, right? You just have to go out of your comfort zone. But at the same time, enjoy the meals.
Yeah.
And then another tip is, can't go wrong with the walking again and the daily movement. Any daily movement that you enjoy, anything. that get your body moving.
Find a way to get it in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
thank
think
you.
the last point, I'm sorry, the last point I want to make is once you get to the point where you have like reached your goal, I think the recommendations is continue to do like an hour worth of movement a day,
Mm-hmm.
5 days a week.
Well, thank you both for joining us today and answering all of our questions. You've been a big help to many of us, so thank you.
You're welcome.
To conclude, if you have someone that you know and love that would like to visit one of our practices, we're going to put the contact information up on your screens now. The recording for this webinar will be posted to our YouTube channel shortly and shared with all attendees via email. Thank you for joining us today.